So yeah, we're going to talk about Twilio today, enhancing patron communication. So we'll start off with what is Twilio? Twilio is a communication tool that you can use to connect with patrons through your notifications. Twilio handles SMS and voice, which is what we use it for in our consortium, but you can also, it also has the ability to do video communication, live streaming, and email. It's scalable and easily customizable. And there are many options and tools to work with in Twilio. So the question is, why did we need Twilio or the like if you choose some other tool other than Twilio? For us, we needed an alternative to print notices. We had some of our libraries that were still doing print notifications, and if you've ever worked with print notifications in Koha, it's a little clunky. For us, holds and overdues are handled completely separate. We get an email for our hold notifications, and we get an email for our overdue notices. And for one of them, I can't remember, it's been a little while now. One of them, we got the notifications for all of our libraries through one email, and the other one gets sent to each individual library. And so we had to parse out, I think it was the hold notifications that we had to parse out and let the libraries pick up their hold notifications from us. And then we had to print them, but you can't just print those notifications. We had to massage the notification a little bit, format it nicely in our letters so that we could send them out in the mail, and so that they could be mailed properly. So it was a process, and it took up some staff time, and it took up postage. And you know, I thought for the longest time we needed to do something a little bit different. It would be nice if we just dumped it, but it left a portion of our patrons without notifications, and that was something that we didn't want to do. So we needed an alternative. Moving over to well, we already had text. We already had text through Koha's built-in text SMS mechanism, but we needed to move over to phone. We wanted to move our patrons, or give our patrons an option to do phone for those that didn't have email or a smartphone. So phone was a good alternative for patrons that used to get print notifications. And doing this helped us to reduce waste. It also eliminated staff time with mailing. They didn't have to format the notifications. They didn't have to stuff the envelopes. They didn't have to put postage on it and send it out in the mail. So there was time saved there. Potential cost savings. We didn't have to print. We didn't have to use up ink. We didn't have to use up staff time. We didn't have to use postage. And so this savings went into our new notification system through Twilio. The built-in Koha SMS to email system was starting to see some blocks, and we noticed that we would be getting more, it would be getting more aggressive as time goes on. There are some things that are going on that are preventing or blocking emails converted over to text messages. They're trying to reduce spam hitting text messaging. So we're just seeing more and more of that become more of a challenge through Koha's mechanism of converting those messages from email over to, or sending it to a text message. So we needed to come up with something that was going to last us for a long time. Direct SMS delivery seems a little bit more consistent than email to SMS and less confusing to the patron. As I said, Koha's mechanism, which is a good mechanism, utilizes, it sends out the text message via email to that text number as an email address. And so cell phones can usually accept those. But as I said, they're getting a little bit more aggressive about blocking what looks like potential spam. So it also comes from an email address. So this way it's coming, when we're using Twilio, we're using a consistent phone number that sends those messages out over and over, and they can put that number in their contacts and make it identifiable. And so it just makes it a little bit more clear and consistent who is sending that text. And also we found that Twilio was more affordable. We found that I did some research on it, and we had a library that was doing some texting already. They had their 4 libraries set up with text messaging going through another service other than Twilio. And we found out that they were actually spending as much, if not, well, they were spending about as much, maybe a little bit less, but quite a bit for just those 4 libraries to send out their 4 libraries to send out phone messages, just phone messages, not text as well. So it was just 4 libraries sending phone messages. And currently our library, all of our libraries, and I'll talk about how many we have in just a second, but all of our libraries are sending text messages and phone messages for about the same, just a little bit more than what these 4 libraries were doing just for phone messages. So we found that Twilio was a much more affordable option. We also found that Twilio is more responsive to support questions. The company that our 4 libraries were using before was not very responsive. In fact, we had problems with the service for a while, and they were still paying for the service, and we were, I want to say 4 to 6 months without the notifications because it was impossible to get through to this other company. Twilio, when I sent out support requests, I got responses like that. So they were really, really good about getting back to you. Twilio is more customer hands-on. The other company that we used, all we could do was send in an email and request what we wanted. And Twilio allows us to log in and see what's going on in the background and make customizations ourselves. So I rarely have to contact Twilio themselves. I can do most of what I need on my end. And I knew very little going in. So with a little help from our support vendor, Bywater, they helped point me in the right direction. And I looked around, did a little bit of research on Twilio and figured out the interface and figured out the things that I needed to know in order to get us up and running. So a little bit about us. So I'm from the Coeur d'Alene Public Library, which is one branch in the Cooperative Information Network, which is our consortium over in Idaho and Washington. So we're a consortium of 28 libraries, and our system has about just under 570,000 items in the system. We also have a little over 100,000 patrons in our system. And I did a little research just before I came here. I looked at our notices that we sent in August of this year. We sent about 54, just a little bit over 54,000 emails to our patrons for notifications in August alone. We sent over 2,000 phone calls through Twilio, and we still keep track of our what our printed notices are. So we still have patrons that aren't set up for one of our notification options, and those default over to printed notifications, which just kind of fall to the wayside now. But we still have about a little under 5,500 potentially printed notifications. That means that they're not getting a phone call, they're not getting a text, they're not getting an email, and so they're just not getting notifications because they don't have anything, any other option that they gave us to notify them. We also sent about 11,000 text messages in that month. So these are all the ways that we have reached out to our patrons in 1 month. So what did we need? We needed to figure out what we were going to do with Twilio. So I did a bunch of research. I reached out to some libraries that were working with Twilio and talked to them and to find out, okay, how many notices are you sending out? How many, are you actually doing as phone calls? What are you spending per month roughly? And it was a hard research to figure out because Twilio's payment system is, more of a you load it up with a payment, and then each notice that goes out counts against that payment. So we had to kind of roughly guess about how much those libraries were spending as they were doing their notices. So I reached out to a few libraries to ask them about their notifications and how much they were generating and how much they were spending on it to get a rough idea about how much it would be costing. I ran reports in Koha to determine our anticipated numbers of notices. So I had to look at our existing SMS messages because we were going to convert over to Twilio for the text messages. And I had to run a report to find out how many print notices, to find out how many potential phone calls we would be making. We also had to have a multi-branch system buy into this. Basically, everybody had to buy into this. The previous phone system was set up in a way that just the 4 libraries that opted in were sending out those notifications technically, because the way the notifications go out, it's basically the circulating library that's sending out the notifications. So I wanted to make sure that we were getting covered properly in this, and I wanted everybody to buy into this, not just certain libraries, because technically it was hard to determine, okay, what library was sending notifications and what wasn't, because currently in Koha, and I don't know if there's been any recent changes in this, but when I was doing my research, I was finding that the notifications were going out, but the library that was listed as the library sending the message was the wrong library. Basically, it's the notification was coming from the owning library of the item and not necessarily the library that's circulating the item. So it was really challenging to pin down how many libraries were going to do the notifications and how we counted that up and divvied that out in the cost. So I wanted to make this simple for our consortium when we just needed to everybody to buy in on this. So that just made it easier on us for determining if we were going to go forward with this or not. So yes, it really depends on how many libraries you've got in your system that are buying into it. If you can live with the way that Koha is working, and you can look at the messages going out. Like I said, it was difficult to determine what libraries to charge how much for those messages. It was much easier to determine just to split it up between the libraries rather than trying to say, okay, this library is sending these notices, but really it's the owning library, not the circulating library. So as long as you can figure out how you're going to pay for it, between the libraries, then you can determine whether or not this is good enough for you to go forward. Like I said, right now it's for us, it was just an all or nothing kind of deal. Next thing that we needed to do, we had to go into Twilio and we had to create a free account to access the APIs. So I went onto the Twilio website and signed up for an account. That part was free. and it offered some ability to do some initial testing just to see what the messages would look like. I could set up a test message and have it sent to my cell phone and receive the call to see what it sounds like. So there were some initial things that I could do to set up an account, and they give you a tiny budget for a free tiny budget for doing some tests. So that was really nice. So we didn't have to pour any money into it as we tested. So they gave us that ability, and we were able to get the information that we needed to pass on to Bywater, in our case for our vendor. So we established account numbers and a phone number that would be consistently used with the account. And before we just flipped the switch and went over to Twilio completely, we had to modify our existing notices. We had to go in there and include dialogue for SMS and phone notices. So I had to make sure that the text messages said what they needed to say. So I made some small modifications to the text messages that we already had. And then I had to go in, if you ever go into your notifications, you'll notice that there's an area for your printed notices. There's an area for your text messages. There's an area for your phone messages, and our phone tabs were all blank. So I had to go in there and I had to create the message that would go out to everyone. I also needed to make sure that the phone message included information that was needed when it called. So it needed to identify itself. It needed to let them know the basic information, and it needed to give them an opt-out. One of the things that Twilio is very stringent on is that you make sure that the people receiving the messages, whether it's text or phone, know how they can opt out. So I made it clear in both that they knew how to, that they were directed to our catalog system and they could opt out of the phone messages or the text messages through Koha. Twilio voice or phone setup, we had to have Bywater, our vendor, set up the plugin for the phone notification so that it would communicate with Twilio. And in that, they just needed the account SID, which was assigned when I signed up for an account in Twilio, and an auth token or authentication token, and the phone number being used. So those are the three pieces of information I needed before we could set up things in Koha. Oh, and there was also the incoming API request URL. When we were setting up the plugin, we also had to make some choices in there to whether or not to send only the first hold notice for each patron and mark all the others sent. So there's an option in there if it calls, it makes a phone call, it's not going to call for every single hold. That would be annoying. So we made sure that we checked that particular option in the plugin so that they only get the first call, because if they're going to pick up one hold, they're going to pick up the rest at that time as well. So we opted to not call them and bug them for every single hold. Right now, Koha, I don't believe, has a digest for holds. So this is very important. There was also another option to choose: do not call the patron if there is an unsent email or SMS notice of the same for the same patron with the matching letter code. So basically, if they opted to have email and phone, or email and text, or all three, if there is an unsent email message, a same message, or an unsent text message, it's not going to make the phone call. So it's only going to make the phone call if they didn't opt for text or email. So that saved patrons being annoyed with phone calls when they got notified some other way. So even if they choose phone, if they've got other methods for that same message, they're not going to get that phone call. So then we had our Twilio SMS set up. And so normally the the preference in Koha for the SMS send driver, we had that set to email. So if a patron had their phone number and carrier selected in there, they would get notified via email sent to their number. We changed that and set it to Twilio instead. So it was a simple change in that particular preference. And vendor support is always a plus. I do not think I would have had the sanity to go through this on my own. Not to say that there aren't people here that could do that on their own, especially if you're supporting your own system. But Bywater was very helpful in getting us transitioned over to this new service. They held my hand in this because there hasn't been a lot of talk or discussion about this kind of system before. And I was nervous about it because I didn't want people losing their notifications. I didn't want to hold up notifications in this transition. So they were very helpful in this. So there were some other choices that we needed to make along the way. So we had the basic setup made, and it was basically functioning, but there are some things that we needed to look at. For text, we needed to create a generic response to replies. So when a notification goes out, it goes out like a text from any other phone number. It shows our phone number that we have selected for our phone calls. It's the same number. But patrons can text back to that number. And the question is, what happens when they do that? When they did that, it was throwing back some default generic response to their text. And so I had to go into the Twilio interface, and I had to say, okay, this is the response I want to give. So initially, I set up a response that basically said, we're not receiving messages through this medium. Please contact call your library or contact us at such and such email. So I gave a response that was directing patrons what to do from there because it looked like they needed further information. For phone and voice, again, you have a phone number that's calling you, and I picked a phone number that was in our state, but we're Coeur d'Alene, and we have libraries in different cities in our area, and also we have libraries across the border in Spokane and other Washington libraries Spokane Valley, Liberty Lake, that are in our consortium. And so they're all getting this same phone number, and this phone number's from way down south in Boise. So some people will call the number back. Some people will think, oh, I'm going to call them back and let them know that I need to renew this item or whatever. They'll call it back, and again, a generic message is played when they call that number. I can't remember if there was just a generic number, or excuse me, a generic message, or if it was just saying that we don't receive calls at this number. So I had put in an initial text-to-speech message for that phone number when we first set it up. Later, I created a menu system, so I decided to go a little bit more complex, and I created a menu system where it was more interactive. So that phone number, if they called the phone number that called them with the message, it would allow them, it would say that you can contact your library, or you can type in the first 3 letters of the library name, and we'll connect you to that library. So I had to set up a workflow for that menuing system. Now, this is not to scare you. Let's see here, is it here? Oh, I'll show that in just a little bit. I'll show that workflow. So anyways, people seldom called that back, but I wanted to make that a little bit more user friendly. So I did create that menu system for patrons so that they weren't just getting this phone number and some generic message. I wanted to kind of make it not a dead end when they called. Another choice that we made, our outgoing phone messages were using a basic but good voice synthesizer. So basically it was reading the text that we had set up in Koha under that phone tab, and it was using their generic Sally person to read it. It was okay, but it was kind of robotic sounding and it didn't pronounce everything very well. So I opted to change it. They gave me options in Twilio to change to other voices, and they utilize Amazon's voice synthesizers, and they have several different voices, male, female, different accents and whatnot. And I chose the poly voice, which sounds really good. And I'm gonna have Jason actually play a sample. We'll see if it.
Hello, this is a notice from Coeur d'Alene Library, a member of the Cooperative Information Network, regarding an item that Ben had requested. The Devil's Light is available for pickup at Coeur d'Alene Library. This item will be held for you through the close of business on May 10, 2022. If you no longer need this item, please log into your account through the library catalog or contact your local library to release this title to the next patron. If you would like to change your notification preferences, please log in on the library catalog at your convenience.
So that's what our patrons are hearing on the phone call. It repeats twice in case it goes to voicemail. So most of these notices are under a minute. So generally we can count on these notifications costing us a minute per notification. And changing over to, that was the Amazon Poly voice. So the built-in Sally voice is a little bit more robotic, like I said, and it didn't pronounce things like it would not pronounce Coeur d'Alene Public Library correctly. So I wanted people to be able to understand what they were hearing. So I opted for that, and we're paying a small surcharge for that, but it's very insignificant on the surcharge on that. All our other phone messages that are not reading the notices are recorded. So the menuing system that I did, I opted not to do any kind of text to voice. I opted to actually record the options for the menuing system. So if they call it back, they're hearing my voice. And I saved those files on our consortium server and then just pointed to them in Twilio. I told it where each of these recordings were located. So they get a general message when the number is called, and they get a menu system for contacting a library. So here's the option for Twilio for the workflow studio. So this was the menu system. So again, don't get scared by this. I opted to do this. These are the choices I had to program in here to tell it how to determine what library they were dialing in. Like I said, they start dialing in the first 3 letters of the library, and then it determines which library it is. So this is basically a logic workflow, and there are different recordings along the way. And then at the end of each choice, it actually dials them through to that library. So that was a more tedious project, but not necessarily something that you have to do. If you want to keep it simple, you could just say, just have a general message that says contact your library, or, go to such and such website, or, whatever you want, and not be this complex. I just chose to do this. This was kind of fun. It was different. And I did it in my spare time. So what extra surprises did we have for us, or the US, after setup? So there are some regulations that you have to deal with in the US. I don't know about other countries, but in the US, you can be fined. You can also be blocked on your messages if you don't have certain things registered. And I found this out. We were going for a while, and things were going smoothly. And then I noticed that I was getting error messages saying that we were being blocked on certain things. And I did some research and found out that you need to do some registrations in order for there to be kind of a trail for them to follow with your messages and for them to understand your activity with SMS. It's frustrating, it's red tape, but we had to jump through some of these hoops in order to do this. So this is basically the explanation. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but basically we had to do a few steps in order to register our number and tell them what it was that we were doing with our notices, our text messages, so that they could say, okay, that looks good. So we needed to set up, we needed to register what's called an A2P 10 DLC, basically a 10-digit number, after we started seeing the texts being blocked. So we had to register the A2P 10 DLC, and that was a process. We had a few hoops to jump through using the Twilio Trust Hub, which is a mechanism that they give you to go through the necessary steps. So they give you this Trust Hub and try to lead you through these steps. And so they're basically trying to help you through this process, but unfortunately, some of it's automated and not as easy to go through. You have to set up a business profile using your library's IRS EIN, or the employer identification number. It's basically information about your business. So they needed to know what business was associated with this number. And this was a difficult hoop to jump through, because the way that our library's EIN, or excuse me, our consortium's EIN was set up, it wasn't set up through the normal channels. And so when Twilio went to go and verify the EIN, it wasn't in the place that they verify. So that was a little bit of a hoop to jump through, but Twilio ended up helping us through that. This is one of the cases where I had to actually reach out to Twilio and say, hey, this automated process isn't working for me. Can you help me in this? And so they did help us out. Then we had to set up what's called an A2P brand. This enables the A2P messaging capabilities for your business. So you have choices. The starter brand, which is less than 3,000 message segments to the US per day, recommended for testing or sending messages with up to 5 phone numbers. So the starter brand is their free option, which is really nice. But if we were sending more than that, so we had to take the standard brand, which is a $44 one-time fee, and that's recommended for sending messages up at scale with up to 50 phone numbers. So you had to pick one of these brands. I would have loved to have used the starter brand, but we were just sending way too many messages. So some of you, if you have less messages, you could go with the starter brand and avoid that $44, but that's just a one-time fee. Oh, why did that repeat? Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay. Then we had to set up, do a setup campaign. We had to show a use case, what we were using the text messages for. So this informs the carriers what type of messages you are sending. So I had to provide a couple of examples of these messages and an overview of what it was that we were using this for. So I let them know it was a notification system for our library to let patrons know that they had holds or overdues, things of that nature. And then I provided a couple samples of content of what goes in those messages. Also, just so you know, being registered added some small surcharges. Again, these surcharges, you hear this thing, oh, I've got to pay $44 here and I've got this surcharge here, and oh, if I choose this voice, it's a surcharge. The surcharges are fairly small though. I mean, it's like 1/10 of a cent per call. So it really does not have a huge impact overall when you consider all the messages that you're sending. So these surcharges were not bad. We had to make some notice adjustments as we went along. This is where I learned the complexity of Koha's notification system. I cannot tell you how hairy that Koha's notification system is, because it, you've set up overdues in one place and you set up these messages in different ways. I had to go to several different resources in order to learn the ins and outs of all the notification systems. I had to bug the heck out of Lucas at one point to get some details on the messages, because it wasn't behaving. One message I have set up was working fine, and another notice that I set up, it was like acting weird and wasn't spitting out what I expected. And so some of them work with some tags and some of them work completely different. So there are different resources. I've got 3 different resources that I highly recommend. These slides will be available next week, but there are 3 different resources that I used extensively to determine, okay, how do I need to set up these notifications, and can I use certain coding here or there? So it's very important that you look at these documents if you're setting up your notices, so you can. The reason I was looking at this stuff is because I wanted to streamline those notifications as much as possible. And in some cases where I was using HTML in my other notices, I couldn't carry that over. I had to put in pauses in certain places. I had to break up the message. I had to tell it where certain chunks of information were. And like I said, it didn't work straight across every single notice. Every notice was a little bit different. So it's important to look at this stuff when you are constructing your notifications. And not just for phone notifications, for text messages, that's very important. For your print notifications, this is good stuff to know when you're doing any kind of notifications. And I left my phone over there. What time is it? Just make sure I'm not going, okay. All right. Some other extra surprises after setup, error reports. So how notifications can get blocked, and you get these notifications. And one of the things that we learned with notifications is we don't always get the information that we want. When we had our email converted over to a proxy server, the notifications that we were getting back wasn't telling us enough information. So we've been working with our vendor to get the information that we needed, so we knew how to respond to the patron, let them know why an email didn't go through. It was it was blocked on their end. Was it marked as spam? Was it because the email address that he gave us didn't exist? Well, there are certain things that will block phone numbers, or certain things that will block SMS messages. And so we needed to be able to determine those things. And so we had to look at the Twilio error reports. And so it's important to look through those. Logging into Twilio, you can view issues you should address, like failed SMS notices. And this is kind of an example of one way you can look at notices. You can get a list of all the errors, and then you can click through. If you click through these notifications, you can get some information about it. I had to like click one of those messages, and then I had to click this resource SID over on the end in order to get more detailed information. So I was seeing the message that was being sent, who it was to, so I could identify what account it was sent to, and then I could see some information about it, but this one wasn't as helpful to me. So I did a lot of digging, was looking at in this area and finding that I was not getting all the information I wanted on this. There's another error message or error log. If you're going through Twilio, if you're looking at the logs, going to the errors and just looking at messaging, you're going to see all the messages that are going out. And so all the ones in the white rows are the ones that were delivered, but these pink ones are the ones that I wanted to look at. And it would tell me the phone number that came from and the phone number that it goes to, and it would tell me undelivered. And if I hover over the question mark on there, it tells me the reason it was undelivered. So either the text message was going to a landline, or it was blocked in some way, or it was turned off. It gave me a little bit more information that I could give as an explanation to the patron. We have, I have some jQuery set up so that I can go in next to the text message, or the SMS number, and I can click on it and give a reason why it was blocked, and it will block the patron's account with that reason. It'll give them that explanation so that they can't do anything until that's resolved. You have to dig a little, but you can see what the issue was and find the number involved. So you have to search for that phone number in that log, and then search for that patron that has that number. So it's a little bit of a process, but you can get the information that you need and respond to those failures. You can choose to remove the number from the patron account, or you can block the patron, or you can provide an explanation. However you choose to deal with those failures is up to you. We choose to block the patron in our case, so that it doesn't continue allowing the patron to have overdues and sending out messages that don't go anywhere. I mean, you can choose to not do anything with the errors and just let it happen. I don't know if Twilio is going to start barking at you saying you've got too many failures at some point. So that's why I choose to address them as they happen. So I will go in there, I will check the logs, and then I will address those accounts as they come up. Few more things to note. So this is just some information about what we are seeing from Twilio. We recharge our account in Twilio every 24 days. On average, we spend about $200 each time. So 24 days, we stick another $200 in Twilio for it to deduct from each time a message goes out. So that's roughly $8.30 a day, or 30 cents a day per library for 28 libraries. So we have 28 libraries. So, dividing that up, that's 30 cents a day. That's not bad. We roughly send about 17,000 phone and SMS notices in 24 days. This equates to about 1 to 2 cents per notice. It's not a bad deal at all. So our former phone service, phone-only service, it didn't do text. Our former phone-only service that only covered 4 branches cost them about $2,200 a year. And we estimate that with Twilio, with both phone and SMS for all 28 libraries, it will roughly cost our consortium about $3,000 per year. So that was very doable compared to the previous service that we were using. So that is it for Twilio. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that it encourages some of you that are wondering if you should go to a phone service or go to a different service for text messages. I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, you can certainly contact me at my email address, or you can reach out to me at Koha. I also have an email address for Koha at vicepresident@koha-us.org. So you reach out to me if you have any other questions about that, or you can ask me questions here if anybody has any questions.
I'll start with the question that Suzanne on YouTube had. She had a question about cost per minutes. And I asked her if this is answering your last part there, where you talked about the cost to the consortium as a whole, whether or not that's answering her question. And I'm not seeing an answer yet, but I'll let you know if she wants some more information there.
Okay.
And
I put that slide back up just in case.
Well, I think there's a question right here.
This is great, because I know a lot of libraries are looking at doing a service like this, Christopher. Have you heard anything from the patrons, or is there a way from Twilio you can report on people's responses or pickups or blockage if somebody's blocking that text message?
The text messages, if they're being blocked, I will actually block the account with a message saying we're being blocked. We can't do that. If they do not have another notification method selected, if they have another notification selected, I just turn it off, but let them know about that. So we try to communicate with the patron in some way. I cannot say that I've had any significant negative impact from patrons. You know, we did make sure when we set it up, we were working with Kyle Bywater to set it up. He set it up so that those notifications only went out between the hours of 9 and I can't remember what the latest hour was, but we just didn't want phone calls in the middle of the night. Some strange voice on the phone.
Amazon Polly, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
I've actually had positive feedback from libraries, particularly the libraries that were doing just the 4 libraries that were doing the phone before. They said things were going smoothly. So yeah.
I just wanted to say that Suzanne said that your slide answers her questions. So
Excellent.
So in preparation to deploy this, how was the marketing or like the campaigning to inform patrons on this service, whether they're switching or not?
We actually did not do any campaigning at all. Some of our libraries were actually doing physical phone calls, and I think that they're allowing the system to do some of those phone calls. They're still doing some physical phone calls, but some of the patrons are already used to phone calls, but we really didn't do anything. We just decided to do a soft launch on it, and it went completely invisible. I mean, there was really nothing that we heard back from anybody, which is, you know, in my case, I think that was a good response. You know, it's like, good, well, people are accepting it, so yay.
So I actually have questions of my own, so I'll ask those. Early on, you said you choose to send only the first hold notice for each patron. I'm imagining that that's the first hold notice each day.
Yeah. So if they have a bunch of notices that are going out at the same time, it's just going to grab the first one and let them know. And you can word that. You can word the hold notice, the hold phone notice, to say there may be other holds. We're not going to call you on all of them. And let them know that way, so that you're kind of covering yourself in that notification. But yeah, it helps to not call them on, if you've got 28 holds that came in, you don't want 28 phone calls.
Yeah, it makes sense. With Twilio, do you still need to choose a carrier when you're using Twilio for SMS messages?
No, and that is so nice because yeah, Twilio handles all of that on their end. So all you have to do is provide a phone number.
I was pretty sure that was the answer, but I just wanted to clear that up. And the facetious question I have is, do they have a Morgan Freeman voice?
Not a Morgan Freeman voice, but they have a lot of options, especially Amazon. They have a lot of options, a lot of accents, like I said, male and female. So yeah, and then lots of options between those different accents. So.
My question is, seems like you're somewhat limited though, with what you can say in your message. So my question is, we send out printed notices when we get to like a third notice, you're in big trouble. And I can just see where somebody getting like a very brief message, then having to call and having more impact on staff. So have you run into that? Is that not a problem?
Yeah, we haven't run into any kind of negative impact with that. We send out 2 notices. 8 of our libraries send out a third notice, but the 2 notices that we send out, we do send out via all 3 methods: email, text, and voice. And yeah, we are careful about how long the phone calls are, simply because we just don't want somebody sitting there for 2 minutes listening to a phone call, but also to help keep the costs down. Text messages are just inherently short. They want you to keep that short and brief. So yeah, we haven't had any trouble with any of our notifications since we made the transition, since we tweaked the wording and, made sure everything is being said that needed to be said in there. You try to be concise with your messages because you don't want it to be too wordy, but you want it to have the information that has to be there. So we do have, I do believe we have digests set up. Oh, what was your? Okay, so the question is, are we just being very general in it, or are we specifically, listing items in those messages? In those messages, yeah, if it's a message about a single item, then yeah, we'll list what that item is in there. But if I think we have digests set up on the options that you have for digests. It does generalize those things. So if there's a lot of stuff listed in there, it will generalize it. Yeah, so we don't want them listing 28 books in a message, but yeah, it's been going smoothly, and it has, like I said, no complaints on it. Everybody seems to be going, everything seems to be going very smoothly with the notices that we've been sending out. No complaints.
So you mentioned that a patron can opt out. So does that mean that they're getting all these overdue notices and they're like, well, I don't want to hear about that, so I'm just going to opt out of this and then claim I never got those messages? How does the opting out work?
So I think that Twilio has some built-in keywords that allows them to opt out, but we don't tell them any of that. We refer them to the catalog system. They can go into their notifications and decide, how they want notifications sent, or if they want them sent at all. So basically our thought on this is that if they choose to not have any notifications, they're not going to get any notifications. They don't have any control over the overdue notifications, but everything else, they have all control over that, and that's up to them.
You're not using this for email, correct? And if you're not, why not?
We're not using it for email right now because we have a fairly good setup with Bywater right now. They're doing the relay through AWS, and we had some kinks to work out with that because some libraries, not all the libraries, wanted to, like ours, we wanted to know why emails were blocked. It would send a very basic, this message did not go through or something like that. But we wanted to know why. Before the proxy, we were getting some notifications that told us why, and we had a workflow where if we have that information, we're going to relay that to the patron. So if it says this email doesn't exist, we're going to tell them we're being told this, it doesn't exist. If it says that it's being blocked, we're going to tell them it's being blocked. If there's some other reason, we want to give them more specific information that helps the patron figure out what's going on, rather than saying, I don't know why you're not getting it. So so we've established that with them, and that's working. It doesn't seem necessary at this point to put in the expense to go to a completely different transport system for email right now. So that's why we're sticking with our current one.
I was going to ask a slightly unfair question because it was more about Twilio's capability themselves rather than what you've been doing. But I've actually answered the question myself, but I thought I'd share the question with the group and the answer. And that was about how international the service is and how available the service is in other geographies. Specifically, obviously, for me, I was looking at the UK. And there's a great website. I'll pop the link in the YouTube channel. on their webpage about just how many countries they support and what support they've got for different number types and toll-free numbers and all that kind of stuff. So it looks really interesting, and we'll certainly be sharing some information with our libraries in the UK.
I think you guys are getting back at me for all the dead space earlier.
Well, let me make one comment though. You won't be able to post a link in the YouTube chat. So if you bring the link over to me, I'm logged in and I can post it in the YouTube chat if you want.
Excellent. Any other questions? I knew this was going to be a hot topic. So. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I hope if you work with Twilio that it goes good for you. And I hope this helps.